name is Carl Cranston. I have a story to tell. This story has aspects of triumph and tragedy, comedy and uncertainty. 40 years of doing show-winning auto interiors, life's ups and downs. If you want to hear the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would said, please click on to the link shown below. By 1975, cars with custom interiors that I had done had won multiple awards around the country. Some were cover cars and feature cars and national publications, including Dick Bronson's 40 Ford Coupe, Sam Gregory's 40 Chevy that won Best Custom Interior at McCormick Place. By 1976, I started doing the high-dollar classic cars, the first being a one-of-a-kind Duesenberg Durham body Roadster, one-of-a-kind car belonging to Bob Baer of New Hampshire. So let's do a little overview here, a review. 1971, I had won my first Best Custom Interior with a 40 Ford Coupe with Richard Bronson from Jackson, Michigan. And then a variety of custom interiors, Sam Gregory's car that won around the country. And that would have been 73, 74. 75, got involved with Beaver doing the heavy iron cars. 1977, was in the middle of doing Richard Gould's 1931 Cadillac V16. My schedule at that time was to get up in the morning at Beaver's and work all day. Several days of the week I would drive down to Zion, Illinois, where my family was, have supper with them. Then I would sometimes drive on down to Waukegan, Illinois, where I still had a trim shop open with employees, go over the situation there, then go back up US 41 to Sturtevant, Wisconsin, go to sleep underneath the cutting table and do it again. May 27th, 1977, 9 o'clock at night. I was headed north on US 41, a 4-lane divided highway with a ditch dividing the lanes. Just past the last red light north of Gurnee, Illinois, all of a sudden from left to right in front of me, I see a blue leisure suit. I whipped my wheel and tried to go behind him another foot. I would have missed him. As it was, I hit and killed him. There were never any charges regarding this accident. This man's alcohol content was 4.55, and he was still walking. Well, after the accident happened, I froze at the wheel and just pulled over, ran back up to the hill. It's funny how your mind will block things out. I remember looking right down at this man, laying right on the center line. I did not see any blood. I did not see that half his head was gone. A car came up the hill. I waved my hands at the car. It was a man driving. He went into the far lane and kept going. Next car came up the hill. I waved my hands at it. It was two girls. The one on the passenger side had the window rolled down, stuck her head out the window and said, "What are you worried about? He's dead." The third car coming up the hill, I ran right back at the car. I said to myself, this one's going to stop. I'm waving my hands. When the car stopped, I was beating my fist on the hood of the car. I looked up. The car was a Lake County Deputy Sheriff car. He had seen where this gentleman had driven his car into the divider of the ditch. He was in the southbound lanes. I was in the northbound lanes. This officer had gone down to the next turnaround and came back up the hill. And by the time he got there, I had already hit and killed the man. Had me tow the car back to my shop in Waukegan, Illinois. Stayed there, got up the next morning, saw the damage done to my car in daylight, took a garden hose and washed the man's brains off the roof of my car. I didn't know it. I guess I was in shock. I had a family to support. I have a car I'm working on that's supposed to be going to a show. I get in my other car and drive up to Sturtevant, Wisconsin. In Waukegan, I told an employee, pull the GTO in the shop, pull the front end off of it. About 11 o'clock in the morning, he calls me in Sturtevant, Wisconsin. His name was Bob Orlando. He said, "I can't work on your goat anymore." I says, "What's the problem? You need a tool?" He said, "No, the man's hand just fell out of the fender." I'd say that's when I lost it mentally. I called my sister in Michigan, my shop manager, my wife. I don't remember driving from Sturtevant back to Waukegan, Illinois. I don't know who it was that drove me to O'Hare to get a plane. Don't remember getting the tickets or getting on the plane. Don't remember getting off the plane in Lansing, Michigan. I remember opening the door to my sister's car. We drove through Michigan up to the Upper Peninsula and went across the Straits of Mackinac. That's the only thing I remember was seeing the bridge just before we went across. Then we turned left in the Upper Peninsula, went over to Wisconsin. Don't remember anything about the drive back down except one time saw a sign that said Green Bay. Don't remember getting to Waukegan, Illinois. Don't remember going back to Sturtevant and working on that Cadillac. That accident happened May 27th, 1977. That Cadillac showed at Henry Ford's Fairlane Estate, July 9th, 1977. The next car I did after that was Pete Rossi's 29 Duesenberg that won Best in Show at Pebble Beach, California. Most of that time period is pretty much a fog for me. Doing those cars and how I did them, I don't know. I was not skilled as an antique car upholsterer. I say I had a hand. He had to give me a hand because I couldn't have done it by myself. When I was in, shall we say, the depths of depression after I killed the guy, my sister Laura Gibney Cranston, or Laura Cranston Gibney, she knew what hell I was going through, and she sent me a couple of poems that meant a great deal to me. One of them was, "Do not now ask the question which cannot be answered, for you would not be able to live it." And the object is to live everything. Live the question now, and perhaps you will along some distant day live into the answer. The other poem that she sent to me, I will quote a little bit of the beginning and then the very end, is a poem called Desiderata, Desiderata, which is Latin for things yearned for. It states, "Go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain and bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself." And the end of it really says it all. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and stars. You have a right to be here. And no doubt, whether it is clear to you, the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive Him to be. In the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be careful. Strive to be happy. Now, after the accident in 1977, and after I got back from this trip with my sister, the only two people that I told what I was feeling inside was my wife and my sister, Laura Cranston Gibney. And what I told them was, I don't know what it was, but something died in me that night. I couldn't make sense of it. I've never had feelings of guilt about this accident, never had a bad dream. I was 100%, it was not my fault. Why do I feel so absolutely horrible? And I couldn't make sense of it. And I knew if I couldn't make sense of it, I couldn't tell other people because they wouldn't be able to make sense of it either. Now, if you fast forward from that event, afterwards, I just always lived with this uncertainty in me of, am I crazy? Why do I feel so horrible? But life goes on. Fast forward to 2014. Tony Stewart had his accident. Now, when my accident occurred, I felt like I could not allow myself to cry. Because if I allowed myself to cry, I would go off the deep end and not come back. So here it is, the year 2014. The accident was 1977. I was 37 when the accident happened. I was 74 when Tony Stewart's accident happened. That was half a lifetime ago for me. And I knew that's the first time that I cried. And I wasn't crying for me. I was crying for Tony Stewart because I knew what hell he was going through. And when I saw his eyes when he had his first news conference, I cried again because it was like my own eyes looking back at me. And when Matt Clark said Tony Stewart is hurting from a broken leg and a broken heart, I knew what he was talking about, because the only time my chest hurt worse than the year after that accident was when I had my heart attack. I have a son who is also a NASCAR fan, and we talked on the phone about this, and I made the comment that just like Tony Stewart said he couldn't make any sense of it, that he knew he'd done nothing wrong. I said it didn't make sense to me in 1977, and it doesn't make sense to me now. I know something died in me, but if you threatened to shoot me, I could not tell you. And my son told me, I know what died in you. I thought you knew. And I said, no, please tell me. He said, before the accident, there was a sparkle in your eyes. And since the accident, you tell jokes and laugh, and you hear jokes and laugh. But I've never seen the sparkle in your eyes, not once. And subsequent to that was when I cried. It was subsequent to this conversation with my son where he expressed what had died in me from his viewpoint. He didn't say what it was that died in me, just a physical manifestation. He no longer saw the sparkle in my eyes. At 4 a.m., October 31st of 2014, I sat down 4 o'clock in the morning and wrote the beginning of this poem. On November 9th, 2014, 4 o'clock in the morning, I wrote the end of this poem. I dedicate this poem to anybody who, for whatever reason, has lost the sparkle in their eyes. It makes no difference to me whether I am by myself or in front of other people. When I recite this poem, the tears come. I think of a sister whose son could not see a light at the end of the tunnel and took his own life. I think of a 51-year-old man with a brilliant mind and creative hands who had a father who could only critique, correct, criticize, and complain, and extinguished the light in his eye. I think of the 50-year-old woman who as a child was Daddy's little princess. And at 14, he betrayed that trust and molested and extinguished the light in her eyes. I've entitled this poem, Did You Know? Did you know that in one moment you could lose the sparkle in your eyes? Did you know that in that moment you wouldn't have time to even say goodbye? Did you know that though you didn't realize it at the time, a part of your soul had just died, leaving a gaping hole behind? Did you know that the grief and sorrow and pain would never completely end, staying with you always like some lifelong friend? Did you know that you must go on, for the life that you have left is still God's greatest gift to you? Did you know that one day He will put His loving arms around you, take away all the grief and pain and sorrow, and make you whole again? Did you know that He will bathe you in mother's love times 10? Did you know that He will let you see His pure white light and your eyes will sparkle once again? As I said earlier, after my son told me what he had seen that had died, the sparkle in my eyes, I cried. This was the sobbing, deep-wrenching cry, but it was not a cry of grief. It was a cry of relief, because what had been going on inside of me for 37 years had made itself known manifestly in the physical dimension. It wasn't until I met Tom Olmson, the producer of this video, that he told me what it was that had died, and that was the inner child. And that's when the fog of uncertainty that I had had for so long was lifted, and things became clear to me. I realized that that inner child is really still alive on the other side. That was what was looking down at me on the table when I had my heart attack, laughing at my grimacing face where I couldn't breathe because a nurse was trying to hold me down. That was the fog of uncertainty was finally lifted. And from there, I have been able to move forward. Hopefully, the stuff that follow will be of interest to many people. I've been a upholsterer of custom, classic, and collector cars for 40 years. I still take great satisfaction at what I do. I give thanks every day that I can get out of bed and go do something. And I give thanks for the breath of life, because you never know how much you appreciate that gift until it feels like you got a 10-ton drug sitting on your chest. I know that one day He, on His chosen day, will tell me, Carl, it is your time. Come home to me. And I will again become one with that pure white light, mother's love times 10, and my inner child that waits, and then my eyes will sparkle once again. The charcoal portrait that you're looking at was done in 1979. In the early 70s, I had done custom interiors that had won many Best Custom Interior Awards. Then I got into classic cars, had cars that won Best Awards, including Pebble Beach in California with the classic cars. It was in 1977, as I stated previously, that I had the accident where I killed the guy. This portrait was done in 1979. Now, at that time, I had stopped my association with Beaver doing the classic cars and had started doing interiors for the Excalibur automobile. I had children that I had custody of from a previous marriage. I was living in Illinois, their mother was living in Michigan, and the courts mandated that I take them back so many times a year. Well, two of my sons decided that they wanted to go live with Mommy for a while. After they had been there for 6 months, they called me up and said, "Come and get us or we're running away from home." So I drove back to Michigan from Illinois, picked them up from their mother, and that was Jackson, Michigan, and drove up to Lansing, Michigan, where my sister, Laura Cranston Gibney, and her husband lived to visit for a time. And while there, my two sons and I went to a local mall, and they were having an artisan's fair there. While there, I happened to notice some portraits done by an artist, and I told my sons that I liked the way this particular artist did the eyes. And so at that time, perhaps even more than today, when a man had something happen to him that was hurting him on the inside, he tried to hide it from the outside world. In effect, it was like the statement's been made, the eyes are the windows to the mind. And he would try to pull the shades over the window so people could not look in. And I was no exception. I was trying to protect my family from the pain that I was feeling. And so when I sat down to have this portrait done, I had to sit still for about a half an hour. And I guess you could say unconsciously, I allowed that shade to go up. And this artist captured what was going on inside. You see, most people look at the eyes. They don't look into the eyes. And I would suggest for anybody that when you're talking to, say, an EMT or a police officer or a vet, that you not only look at their eyes, but look into their eyes, because exterior they may be looking like they are in perfect health, and when you look into eyes, it tells a completely different story. And if you happen to see Tony Stewart's news conference after his accident, or saw the advertisement on TV about the American Legion and the vet there, look into their eyes and then look into the eyes of this portrait. All three of us probably had differing stories, but the story in the eyes remained the same for all. Now in 1979, I still had a shop in Waukegan, Illinois, and it was not the best of neighborhoods. And my practice many times was to go down there in the middle of the night, and a gas station owner that had the habit of going in early in the morning, short blocks from me, was shot and killed in his own business. So when I was in the shop in the middle of the night, I had a .25 automatic in my boot, and under a couch pillow was a zip gun with a .410 shotgun shell in it. After this portrait was drawn, my one son did not like the looks in the eyes of the portrait. And about a week after getting back to Illinois, I was going to go work at night, and when I looked for my two guns where I kept them, they weren't there, and I thought somebody had got in and taken them. It wasn't till the year 2014 when I was talking to my one son about this whole incident with Tony Stewart that he told me that he didn't like the look in my eyes and that he was the one that had made the guns disappear. When I saw the finished portrait, I realized that I had let the shades up, so to speak. And after that, I made a conscious effort to keep those shades pulled down to the outside world. I suppose in retrospect, I should have been more open. I'd say probably some people, particularly within my own family, felt that I was cold and uncaring, which in fact the opposite was true. I also could say probably that for years I was running from the emotions that that event in 1977 had in me and how I could make no sense of it. I've moved several times over the years, and that portrait has never hung on the wall. It has always been in a bedroom closet facing the wall. By the year 2013, I'd given up hope of ever getting an answer to my internal question of something had died in me that night, and what was it that had died? Then along came 2014 and Tony Stewart's accident. I guess in a figure of speech, you could say that I had a 600-pound gorilla that I tried to keep in the back closet, and Tony Stewart's accident caused that gorilla to be in the living room, so to speak, and I was able to deal with it. My son gave me a partial explanation, and then Tom Olmsen, the producer of this documentary, gave me my final answer. And as I said before, it was an unbelievable relief for me to realize that no, I wasn't crazy, that something had in fact died within me. Now, for people that know me that would look at this, they would say, yes, that's Carl sitting there. But in actuality, see, it is my premise, my belief, that every human that comes into this three-dimensional physical world was already a spirit entity before entering this body, continues as a spirit entity in this body, and will continue to be a spirit entity when this body is discarded. And so, in actuality, nobody has ever seen Carl. You only see the means that Carl gets around in. Over the years, I had questioned many times my own sanity, if I had obsessed upon my question, it would have driven me over the edge to self-destruction. So I tried to block this out of my mind as much as possible, but periodically events would occur, and there it was right in front of me again, and I had to deal with it. Now, after these revelations from my son and from Tom Ohmsen, I have another premise to state, and that is that each person also brings with them into this physical world their inner child. And that's most visible, say, from a 2 years old to 5-year-old child, where you see the light in their eyes, the sparkle. And then sometimes events happen that inner child recedes, and the sparkle and that light is gone. We hear much today about the term PTSD, and the general public, it's some kind of mental disorder, really don't understand it. But if the public as a whole could view that person not as having a mental problem, disability, a little bit crazy, but rather view them as a parent grieving over the loss of a child, and you only have one inner child. And I have known parents who lost a child at an early age, and though the intensity of the grief may lessen with the passage of years, it's always there with that parent. And it is my prayer, my hope, that society as a whole could look at these people not as nut jobs, mental disability, but as a grieving parent, that there would be a lot less confusion on their part and a lot more compassion. And for those that go through that inner torment, that hell on earth, if you would, if they could look at themselves as a parent grieving over the loss of a child, it is my opinion that there would be a lot less pain and a lot fewer suicides from people who have this term PTSD. I don't call it a disability, I call it a grieving process that is natural for any parent. And the person may present the grief, they may present anger, not at any individual person, but the whole situation. And that does not necessarily mean that they fit the term of bipolar. It's just different aspects of the same thing, dealing with an inner grief. It is finished. Amen.
Obviously, it's impossible to include all of the events that could be of interest in a 54-year career in a short video such as this. Carl is available for speaking engagements to tell more of the rest of the story, particularly groups addressing issues of individuals with post-traumatic stress syndrome. Carl does not charge a speaking fee, but he does require reimbursement for expenses, travel, lodging, food, and so forth. Inquiries should be addressed to the address and contact number on your screen.
For myself, the production of this documentary has been both gratifying and painful. If the things presented here cause just one individual to step back from that last step into total insanity and self-destruction in an effort to escape that inner torment and pain, then any pain that I may have experienced will have been worth the effort. The production of this documentary has entailed multiple trips to the Flat 5 studio in Salem, Virginia. And our usual procedure was to do a segment and then have it on a DVD sent to me, and I would review it and we'd make changes and so forth. The last time that we made one where I made the statement that he would tell me that it was my time, in reviewing the video, it came to me that this could be stated just a little bit differently, and then it would become inclusive or universal. In other words, instead of he would say to me, he would say to you, it is your time. And from that, I used the rest of the statement to add 2 verses to the poem as it was originally written. And now you could say that the incident, the accident, the event was the alpha, and the day that arrives when he says, it is your time, that will be the omega for each of us. What you are looking at is the complete poem with the 2 additional verses, and now, in my perspective, the poem is indeed complete.
For information on how you can start your journey towards healing and recovering from the effects of PTSD, or to help others do the same, please go to the website address below.